here in the shop. Once again, I say this every week. I don't know why I don't say this. It's gonna be a crazy week. It's always gonna be a crazy week here. So basically, today what I need to do is knock out 4 full axle builds if I can. That's the goal by the end of today. I want to build both third members for the bomber car, 2 9-inch third members with spools in them. I want to go ahead and knock out the front Dana 60 for the Colorado for Ultimate Adventure, and then I also want to knock out the rear 14 bolt at the same time. I need to film the 14 bolt for the show, so I need to pick up some B-roll shots there, and so that's going to be the plan. So let's jump into it right now. Let's knock out some 9 inches. So the 9 inches that are going in the bomber, it's Yukon nodular iron, dropout low pinion front and rear. I'm doing a 40 spline spool, same thing, front and rear. 5, shoot, I can't even remember what gears are in it. Hold on. I built so many axles this week. This one's getting 543s in it for gears. So it's a 543, so it's a super deep gear, but that's okay. This is a rock crawler. And then obviously the Daytona pinion support and a forged yoke. One nice thing I like about the 9-inch is that you can build it all basically on the bench. Makes it super easy. I'm basically going to assemble the pinion support, press it all together at the press, and then I'm going to take, usually when you do 2 of them like this, you can just take the information from one, transpose it right over onto the other, and you'll be perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and get the pinion bearing preload set first on my pinion support, and then I'll move on from there. Use solid spacers whenever I can on these builds. I just like them a lot better than crush sleeves. I mean, some of the OEM stuff you have to run a crush sleeve, but I really prefer a solid spacer. Now, in this case, I'm at 25 inch-pounds of rotating load, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 5 thousandths to it, and that should get me right back to that. I really want to be at the high end. I like to be at the high end of the spec if I can. That's just a personal preference, so I'd like to have this one at like 15 inch pounds of rotational load. You can go either way. Some people like to run their gears a little loose on pinion bearing preload. I prefer to run them a little tight because, especially in a crawler, it's not going to see a lot of high-speed stuff, but what it is going to see is a lot of load through the low range in the transfer case, a lot of pressure on those bearings. So I just tend to run them just a little bit tight. Personal preference. So if I'm looking at a spec, if it says 10 to 15, I'm going to hit 15 if I can right on the nose. So I've added 5 thou, put it back in the press, we'll press it, and we'll see how it works. This is another thing I like about doing the forged stuff is that I don't use the nut to pull it all together. What I actually do is I basically just assemble the entire pinion support like this in the press, flip it upside down, and then I'm going to press it together, which is essentially the same as tightening that nut, but it's less stress on the threads on the pinion. So all I gotta do is press it down, I'll put a good amount of pressure on it, and then I'll be able to check that pinion bearing preload. Just make sure if you do it this way that the splines are already engaged in that yoke. I have had some where the yoke just sort of catches the edge of the spline. Right at 15, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. So then what I'll actually do now, is now I know how thick that shim is. So that shim is 20 thousandths of an inch thick. So what I'll actually do is break out the other pinion support, the other gear set, and now I know that when I build that one, I'm just gonna grab 20 thousandths worth of shim on that solid spacer, throw it in there, and we should be good to go. Sometimes when you're doing these super deep gears in these nodular iron dropouts, the gears actually contact that nose bearing. I'll show you what I mean right here. You can see, come on to this side right here. You can see when I'm trying to get down to the proper backlash, I'm just catching that casting flange right there. So when this happens, what you got to do is basically pull the pinion support back out, get near the grinder, and just relieve a little bit of this, just to give it room for that gear to move around. It's not a big deal. It's just because, you know, this is a super deep ratio, 541, whatever it is. And so because of that, the gear is a lot closer to the pinion. I've had to do this on a bunch of them. It's not a big deal. You just got to take your time, make sure you don't grind too much, and just clearance it enough. So now I have 1/3 member built. Basically, now that I got clearance for that ring gear, hold on. Once you get clearance for the ring gear itself, all you have to do is then set the backlash by moving these adjusters side to side. I like it between 6 and 8, same as usual. I run these right at that 8 number. That gives plenty of room for the gear oil to get in there and actually run a really extra thick gear oil in here. Then you put the locks on, it should be good to go. You can run a gear tooth pattern check if you want. I'm not going to. I'm quite certain it's good. I've done enough of these 9 inches that I know it's going to be good. Now all I have to do is redo all of that for the other third member for the back. All right, this is axle number 3 today. This is Dana 60 99-04. I love these axles. You saw me pick this up in my Toyota. This is for the Colorado. It's part of the Motor Trend special we're doing for Ultimate Adventure. I was going to film this axle rebuild for that particular project, but looking at how the episodes are shaking out right now, it looks like we're probably just going to do one axle rebuild and just sort of have this one already pre-done. So I'm going to go ahead and knock this one out now and get it done. It's getting a Yukon gear and axle 513s, 1350 for joke, obviously master install kit. I'm actually going to keep the stock shafts as spares because Yukon sent me a 35 spline outer to put on the unit bearings. I've got 35 spline unit bearings from East Coast Gear Supply, and then I'm going to slide in some RCVs. So hopefully this build goes quick and dirty, and then I can jump onto the 14 bolt. That one's without a fail. So on the Dana 60 axle, you could have pinion depth shims between this bearing race and the housing, or you can have pinion depth shims between the actual bearing and the pinion head. They both do the same thing. They basically move that pinion further towards the axle center line. I've had really good luck with these Dana 60s using what's in the Randy's book, or the Yukon book, I should say. You get a book with every gear set, and they'll give you like what the factory shim depth was. And I've had really good luck just basically duplicating that. So that's what I've been doing on them lately. And I'll go in and check them, and the gear tooth pattern is usually bang on. If it's not, I'll go back and swap it out. But this one I'm going to go ahead and just start with that base shim depth, which in this case is 52 thousandths of an inch. That's what we're going to start with. We've got our oil slinger in there as well. And now we can go ahead and reassemble it. One thing you do need to pay attention to from the factory, some of these Dana 60s uses a crush sleeve. And where's the, oh, there's a crush sleeve right over there. So your kit, your install kit will come with some crush sleeves. So this is a crush sleeve right here. If you set the pinions beside each other, so in this case, get them on the table there. So you can see this is where the crush sleeve would sit. You can see this pinion, the shoulder is a lot higher up. This means that this pinion does not use a crush sleeve, it just uses shims. So you don't need to get a solid spacer kit with aftermarket gears. 9 times out of 10 on the Danas, the actual pinion is going to have that shoulder already in it, and that means you can just go ahead and use shims. So that's what I'm using on this one. Woo, it's starting to rain outside. So that's one nice thing with the Danas is, you know, you don't have to worry about getting a solid spacer kit because it's built into the pinion itself. So all I got to do now is basically drop this pinion in, throw a baseline shims in. I don't know what it's going to be. I'll probably start with half a stack, put the bearing in, put the yoke on, tighten the nut down, and then check it out. So I started with a baseline of about half the stack of those, and you can, that's obviously too loose. You can even still, there's even still some play in there, and it's all the way down, like it's, so there's no more pulling in there. So I'm gonna take it apart and pull some out. Took a couple tries to get it right, but right now the rotational load is right at 25 inch-pounds, which is what I want it to be. I don't put the seal in or anything like that, and even reuse the old nut until my spec is good. Right now the spec is good, so what I'll do is I'll take the old nut off, pop the yoke out, put the seal in, put the little spacer in there, the oil slinger, and then I'll put the new nut on. I even put a little bit of Loctite on, even though it's captured nut. Then I can drop in the differential. Got the differential in. Differential's in. The Dana 60 front is done, well, at least the gear set is done. I haven't stabbed the axle shafts in or put the new 35 spline unit bearings on yet, and that is because I still have some brackets to add to this axle, and then I want to paint it. So I've even just put the cover on for now with no silicone. I'm keeping the original cover, so I'll be able to pull this cover off, and then what I can do is I can pull this cover off, put the original cover back on when I go to paint this axle, but I still have the link brackets to install, and that's later on this week. So once that gets done, then I'll be able to paint it. I'll probably paint it and the rear 14 bolt at the same time. So now this one's rebuilt. That's 2 9 inches, one Dana 60. Last one to do today is the 14 bolt. Fourth axle for today is going to be the 14 bolt. One thing you need to watch out when you're doing these 14 bolts is if it's a limited slip 14 bolt like this one here is, let's get the cover off. If you see a center section that looks like this, that means that you cannot install the Grizzly locker from Yukon Gear and Axle. You need to make sure that you have an open carrier 14 bolt. The good news is I do a lot of 14 bolts, and whenever I'm at pull apart, if I don't grab the whole 14 bolt axle, I actually tear the cover off, and I'll sometimes grab the open carriers and just bring them home and keep them in stock. So I have a few open carriers kicking around, so I'll be okay for this one. But now I got to tear this one down, and I actually got to get some B-roll of it at the same time for Motor Trend. All right, so got those axles all re-geared. Man, I need a haircut. Woo, maybe I'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so got those axles all re-geared. Today I'm actually going to jump on the Bomber. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between these two vehicles because they kind of got to both be done at the same time. The Colorado's got to be done to head out to Ultimate Adventure, and then I come back from Ultimate Adventure. I'm back in the shop for like 2-3 days, and then I got to take off and we shoot the final episode of Four Wheeler with the Bomber. And I really want to kind of get it like 99.9% done before I leave for Ultimate Adventure, just so it's done. I don't have to worry about it. So I think what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to jump on the fuel cell. What I got is just a really sort of simple plastic cell. There's actually nothing in it right now. It's just a blow molded cell. And the reason for that is because I'm going to put the new Holley integrated fuel pump system in there. So I would be throwing out half of the junk inside the cell. So just order an empty one. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that. So I'm using this Holley fuel pump hanger kit. I've started to use these in a few of my rigs, and I absolutely love them. Mainly because not only is the pump now in the tank, that allows it to run a little bit cooler, but it also has the filler on top of it. And you can see when it goes down in, once it's in here correctly, it's perfect for a buggy because I basically have, the feed, I have the return, I have a way to fill it right there, a nice simple way to fill it up. It's so much simpler than having to have that big lever lock thing that you get in a lot of fuel cells, and then dealing with adding an external pump and all that kind of stuff. This is super easy. This is perfect. I think I'm going to use this on, I've used it on another rig. This is probably going to be all I use going forward. So now what I have to do now is I have to basically trim it to the right height. You can see it's sitting a little bit too tall right here, and so what I need to do is I need to the instructions are pretty simple. They just basically show you how to do it. I got to set this sock near the bottom of the tank. It can't be like buried against the bottom or I won't be able to pick up. And then I just basically break off these little extensions right here. So right now I got to move this up probably about 3/4 of an inch, and then I can go ahead and install the pump, and then the fuel cell's done. The way this pump is secured is you cut the hole, drill all the holes, and there's a little metal ring that actually goes down in there. And then the ring is secured using a couple of zip ties. And then I just went ahead and started all my bolts just to make sure that they were going to be good. I've already adjusted the height of the pump, set it to the depth of the tank. I then knocked off these extensions that had to be broken off. They have like a little milled area they just break off. And then I installed the return line. According to the instructions, it has to be 1 inch, 1 inch higher than the sock. So I've done that. And so now all I have to do is drop the pump in. One thing I will have to add to this tank is some type of vent. I don't have it here yet. I had to order a bulkhead fitting. I thought I had some here in the shop, but I'm out of bulkhead fittings. I want to do a -6 vent that'll basically run up the cage and then down the opposite side. So because I don't have any bulkhead fittings, I'm just going to have to leave that alone. I'll just put the pump in loosely for now, and then I can just pull it out and easily get my arm up with it. Build the fuel cell mount. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because This cell sits on top of this tube and on top of this tube, which is fine. I actually like how it fits in the back of the chassis. I think it actually fits in there really, really well. I need to obviously run a strap in these sections right here. And the problem is, if I run a tube off of here and come forward, there's gonna be a big gap right here because these tubes are kind of up on this roll just a little bit. So, and I don't wanna, I guess I could run a tube across. I could do that. I could do a tube across, but I kind of want to take advantage of these little indents in here. So I actually think what I'm going to do is kind of make like a little T. So I think I'm going to make a piece of plate that's going to sit vertical, that's going to go across and then drop down and pick up this tube right here. So it'll basically come across and then kick down a little bit, pick up that tube right there, and then I'll just make a flat plate that'll sit on top of it, and then that flat plate will also have the mounting holes in it. So this will actually scoot forward just a little bit, and that way when the strap comes down through here, it'll come forward and I'll just drop into that mounting hole on that sort of T piece that I'm gonna make. And then I think that'll work. I think that will be perfect for what I need. I think eventually I might do something in here storage-wise. I don't know. That's always tricky on a tube buggy. You know, it's like, do you want storage? Do you need storage? I mean, it's just a trail chassis. If anything, I might build something that sits on the top as like a little basket maybe to store junk. I don't know. We'll wait and see. I'll wheel it a bunch and then I'll decide. But right now, I'm going to work on those mounts. So this is the mount that I came up with. I actually cut it all out last night and then let it cool. Went and got my hair cut this morning. And then great clips. That's who cuts my hair. And then came in this morning and tacked it all in. You can see what I did. It's kind of it's a different design. I could have just easily run just a piece of tube up. But what I did is I kind of made these super cool little squared off pieces because I think they kind of look like my trailing arms. It's also a lot lighter than a couple pieces of tube, but it is just as strong. And it kind of gives it a cool look, I think. And it's kind of just a neat setup. So now the fuel cell mount's done. All I'll have left to do is run some straps. I'll just cut some 16 gauge steel and I'll put a bolt. What I'll probably end up doing is welding a stud onto here. So the strap will just come down and come back like that. Or I may fold it under and run a bolt down through so that way the cell can slide all the way to the back. But I don't think it's going to be a big deal to be forward like that. Like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do for storage. I think long-term plan might be some sort of basket that sits on top. But fuel cell mount is done. One more thing done on this buggy. So I've got the seat mounts now done in the Bomber Fab car. They're basically sitting right in here. I had to add this bar to the chassis and I had to make it go up and over the transmission. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some removable tube clamps right here and right there. I did a matching bar in the back to pick up the rear seat mount. And now what I need to do is come up with the shifter mount. Now the shifter for this buggy, I'm actually going to use this M40 speed shifter. I talked to my buddy Marvin. He's got one of these in his Jeepster McJeep's face, and he absolutely loves it. So I was like, perfect. So that's what I'm going to do. The mount is actually going to work out really well. It's actually going to go right in between the two seats. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut some basically backbones for that mount just to saddle around that, and it'll just sit up in there. I just got to figure out if it needs to be up here or back there. In order to figure that out, I got to climb inside the buggy. Ended up being a pretty simple design. I just made a flat plate, bolt the speed shifter to, and then I just made these two little backbones that are going to go in. I've been using the same shape on a bunch of parts of the buggy. That same cutout was in the trailing arms, and if you remember, I did that on that fuel cell brace as well. And then this just goes right in right. Hold on, let me trade hands here so you can see what's happening. This is going to sit right on that tube right there, right in between the two seats, just like that. And then I'll just have to weld the tube. Boom, shift mount, done. And that is going to be where I end it for today and for this week, because I got to load up a car on a trailer, and then I got to meet my buddy Kevin with his car and put on the same trailer, because tomorrow we're on our way to LS Fest in Bowling Green. This is Zelda. This is Zelda. She's our new puppy. She's spending the day at work with me today. Isn't she the cutest? Oh. We just adopted Zelda from the pound. Had her for about a month. She's been a great little puppy dog. And it's fun having her kick around the shop. She naps in the corner and then hangs out and gets belly rubs. Hey. Oh, you're so cute.